my spiritual gifts is getting downloads, or I think it's called claircognizance. And it's where you just know things to be true, and you know certain things that are not true, and you just have like very powerful intuitive experiences that are sometimes emotional, but also for me it's very logical. When I did Ibogaine, I had a very emotional experience where I felt like it was like a memory of being in a whole soul and having that soul fractured and having the other part separated, and knowing that I was going to watch that other half or portion, could have been a third, I have no concept of that, but it was a fracture of my soul that I would watch descend into evil, and that I would be separated from that part by so much distance and so much time. My concept of time was like it was billions of years that it would take to recover that portion of myself. And it was just intense agony, looking forward and knowing what was going to happen, but having this very strong sense of determination that I would follow that evil portion into the depths of hell, and I would suffer from incredible pain in the process of recovering this other soul, this part of myself that would not remember that it was light. It would become so infected with darkness that it would hate me. You know, there would be so much intense hatred that it would try to destroy me in every attempt to rescue, but that ultimately I would be successful, and the mission would be worth it, because this process had to happen for learning and understanding. And now, you know, my understanding of free will is that there is a state of innocence and ignorance in which it is impossible to have true free will. It would be like having two doors that look exactly the same and saying, okay, choose, but you don't know what's behind the door. So it's a blind decision. And when you don't understand the consequences of something, conceptually or experientially, it would be like having a blind person imagine, you know, the color red. There's nothing, no context. And so people think, you know, like an innocent and morally neutral being can make a free will decision, and that's not true. They can make a decision based on prior preferences. But if there are preferences, they were programmed. They were created by whoever created them. So Prime Creator, Source, had to have created preferences in any being that makes a choice. Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to choose. Like if you didn't have a preference, let's say you had a bunch of dishes that you've never tried, and they're covered up. You can't even see them. You can't smell them. You've never tasted them. You don't have a preference. You're basing a free will decision would be like, okay, it's random then. And that's not really a free decision because it's based in ignorance. The only way to actually choose is to be able to taste each one. And then once you taste them, you're like, okay, I like that one. But even that, you know, is is a bad analogy because you have preferences. Someone might have a genetic preference to like cilantro, and so a dish that has cilantro in it's like, oh, no, I like that one. But another person has a genetic preference to dislike cilantro, and if there's a dish with cilantro in it, they're not going to like it. Or level of sweetness or level of saltiness. Like, I like things really salty. And so there's pre-programmed preferences. That's not free will because I didn't choose the preferences. You only have free will once you can when you can experience every single preference. And then you get to experience what are the consequences of having these preferences and following through on these preferences. What is the ultimate cause and effect of every possible action? And only a being that has experienced everything can actually have true free will. And so it's only retrospectively, in hindsight, that you can have free will. So it's like if Adam and Eve were to really have free will eating of the tree, and this is, I believe, an allegory, it's not reality. Only way to actually give them free will is to put them inside of a simulation and let them explore each option and say, okay, this is what would happen. Now you can feel, and now you can see, and you can experience what it would be like if you chose this one. And now choose the other one. Choose never eating from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. What happens? Choose eating from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. What happens? And now, at the end of that experience, now decide which one you want to do in actuality. It's the only way to have true free will. It's and that's why the tree was called the knowledge of good and evil, because that was when they were able to experience. Like, never experiencing the knowledge of good and evil would have kept them in a state of moral ignorance. And moral ignorance is an incapacity to have free will. So the preference was programmed into them both to want to experience that which they didn't understand, because God programmed curiosity into them. And again, I don't believe this story is actually true. It's an allegory, I believe, to the fall of consciousness. There was an aspect of consciousness that fell into darkness and is experiencing what that path feels like. And there's an aspect of consciousness that never fell and that stayed out to observe as a watcher, as an unfallen angel in symbolism, that would see and observe what the consequences of evil are, and they would be the ones to bring that other aspect back. And so there's a cooperation in salvation. And Jesus is such a beautiful type of that, because he incarnated into the fallen, into the body that was fallen, but he brought with that body a divine mind and a divine will, fully connected, never fallen. So there were two souls in one body. One soul had all the feelings, all the emotions, all the experiences inherited through the fallen nature, and he had the divine soul. So a two-souled being, that's what Christ is a type of. And also willing to suffer and take on vicariously that fallen nature, and the fallen nature of every being, and integrate that into the divine and be the bridge. And so there are unfallen beings that also wanted to follow in that footstep, and that is part of the process of salvation, in my view, which is where the unfallen get to participate in the salvation in the same way that Jesus did, through self-sacrifice, through surrender. Jesus is a template, and I believe I'm one of those volunteers that incarnated into Earth to be able to overcome and awaken the fallen aspect. And I believe the Earth plane it's a training ground for the lower astral realms, because the only way that these fallen beings that are influencing Earth, this Earth plane is highly influenced by dark entities that live in lower astral planes. I don't know how many of them are, but I believe there are more than just hell, the underworld. And hell is the lowest. And they're all simulations, but just like Earth is a simulation, they're training programs. But the beings that entered into this training programs have no way to get out. They are absolutely trapped in their state. And the only way for them to get out is for an unfallen being to incarnate in and awaken them. And initially they are going to be corrupted, because you have to come in many, many times in order to get to the place where you're uncorrupted by that incarnation. I believed Christ was the culmination of this training program, this training path, was the ultimate result of integrating all these experiences, all the times that, there were where you fully forgot that you were divine. To be able to come in and remember from birth who you are, and to not ever get corrupted by sin, that takes many, many lifetimes. So that's my view, is that Jesus is the template of the perfect, like, once you beat the game. Once you beat the game, then you can do what Christ did. And that takes a lot of training. And this, I don't know where I'm in my training path, but I know that I am destined to incarnate into, ultimately, the most evil of beings, to awaken them and draw them back. And I'm having a part in this lifetime of drawing some that in other lifetimes I've prepared. So it's like I'm living simultaneous lives in different realms. Maybe I'm living a simultaneous life in hell right now. Maybe I have multiple. But that experience of feeling what it felt like to be committed to being committed to any amount of time, any amount of suffering, just doing whatever it took to bring them back, and having that just deep, heart-wrenching love for the fallen. And it's not, it's a hatred for what they do, because what they do is hurting others and it's hurting themselves. But their soul is precious. And this is where I think that Christianity just falls so short, is that there's this idea that there's a limit to God's mercy, and that there's a time at which their mercy will no longer be extended, and that some people get beyond the saving arm of God. The reason I know that is true, because I've experienced what it feels like to feel that there's no limit. There's no limit to the mercy, and there's no limit to the intelligence, the strategic intelligence of the being that created the simulation and that wrote each script. Like, I'm not doing anything of my own intelligence, my own volition. These are all programs. I entered into a script. I'm simply following a script. It comes through in my preferences, and my preferences determine my free will. Free will is the sense of choosing, is the sense of, I feel drawn to this. And that too is a program. In essence, it's an illusion so that I can participate in this process and experience what it feels like. And through that experience, it changes you. Simply acting out this script and experiencing what it feels like is what transforms the character so that we never want to ever participate in evil, and we only ever want to express love. And so in that way, we can't claim any ownership, authorship of our own actions. So therefore, there's no glory, there's no pride. And yet we get the privilege of participating in the experience. And Christianity just simply cannot logically do any of those things. Either God is doing in you and you don't have any free will, and if God then saves you, it's all his glory, which is good. That's the way it should be. But then it's also his responsibility for the lost being lost. And that's something that is a huge, what's the word? It's just unacceptable that a God who really is all powerful would give up and would not be smart enough, not be strong enough, not be patient enough to save beings that he created and would have been able to predict their actions. It's just mind-boggling how many people can accept that. And then the other hand, if God is not all-powerful and doesn't save you unilaterally and you have to participate, then you do get credit for your own salvation. And so you can't and those who are lost are responsible for their being lost. And so there is glory in that. And there's a sense of like, how can you not take credit if you had to participate in your salvation? But then they had this cognitive dissonance, this complete contradiction, like, oh, God does it in us, but he's not going to do it in the lost. And I have to participate, but I don't get any credit. It's like, it doesn't make any sense. So that's sometimes when I remember what it felt like to have that love, that profound love and commitment, it just, if everyone felt what I felt, they would know that the biblical concept of salvation just falls so short. Like, God created the earth 7,000 years ago. Men fell, and that God's patience is going to run out in 7,000 years. And I'm like, no, I guarantee you that he's willing to go take billions of years. And he's so much more intelligent strategically than you give him credit for. Their concept of God is so incredibly small. And it makes me really sad. But I think eventually a lot of people are going to see through the illusion that Christianity has cast on them, that the Bible is not the revelation of God's character. It was a test to see if you would fall for that. And those who accepted that, it just reflects, it reflects their own character. The people who wrote the Bible, it was a reflection of their own impatience, their own sense of vengeance, and their own sense of pride. And that's not who the source of everything, Prime Creator, really is.